Hey guys, it's Cassie aka Cats and Camera, and today I'm doing my May wrap up. So in May I participated in the mental healthathon and I read 11 books. So first up I read Illogical Behaviour by John Corey Whaley. This one was quite a sweet, nice, fluffy read. It's about a kid who's agoraphobic and another girl who's trying to fix him. But then they become friends, and also her boyfriend is a part of it. It's told from both perspectives. And yeah, it was just really fun, really sweet. I really enjoyed all the characters, even the secondary characters like Solomon's parents. And yeah, if you want just a really quick short read that's not really heavy, give this one a go. Next up, I buddy read Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filler with Simone over at Me, Simone and I, and we both really enjoyed it. So this is told by this guy Matt, and it's pretty much his life story. He's trying to explain how when they were younger his brother died, and the whole way through the story it's kind of going back to that time, going forward to now, and sort of unravelling the story on how he died and what happened since. And yeah, obviously mental healthathon in this. Matt is schizophrenic and he does spend time in institutes and does some kind of questionable things, but talk about it in a very clinical, normal way. So sometimes it is shocking, but again, like I said, me and Simone, we both really enjoyed this. The writing's kind of weird because he'll be telling you something that happened in the past, and then the next sentence it'll be now because somebody's in the room with him and he's talking about them. But even so, I did really enjoy this one. Can you not, man? There's not enough room, obviously. So next up, it was Free Comic Book Day, and I thought in honour of that I will read a comic book, so I picked up Bedlam Volume 1. This one is really graphic, it's a horror, there's a lot of blood and people die, and it follows this guy who is a bit of a, you know, maniacal murderer, psycho kind of guy, but also 10 years later he's cured and he's trying to help the police find this other person that's doing loads of murdering. And yeah, if you don't like loads of blood and people dying and kids dying and animals dying, then definitely don't give this one a go. But I find it really interesting. It's only a 2-volume comic, so I do want to pick up the next one and see where it goes. And as always, I like to show what it looks like inside, so this is what the artwork looks like. Next, I read My Mother FATA Diary by Ray Earl. This is the 2nd volume. And this is non-fiction. It's about Ray Earl. It's her diaries when she was growing up as a teenager. And yeah, it's an interesting read. If you don't like unlikable characters, then don't read it. I've seen a lot of people that talk negatively about it on Goodreads, saying that she's horrible and they don't like her, but it's a teenage girl's diary. Teenage girls don't write about the nice stuff that happened, they write about the things that annoy them and what's upset them, and they talk about people in a bad way. So yeah, that's what it's like in here. And Ray deals with a lot of stuff. She deals with her weight, she's got weight issues, she's got OCD, there's a lot of anxiety, talk about her friends and whether they actually like her and boys and all that sort of business. You know, a teenage girl's diary who also happens to have mental illnesses. And yeah, I think this one goes into more of the mental illness side of things, because I did read the first one a little while ago, but I can't remember it talking about OCD and stuff like that. So I do think it goes a bit more into it in this one. And also trigger warnings for talking about abuse, because she does mention a past abuse that happened to her when she was younger. Next up, I read Pulling Strings by Riley Long, I do believe, and this was a romance between 2 guys, and one of the guys has bipolar disorder. So the thing about this one, I really enjoyed the mental illness rep. He does go to a therapist, he does talk about medication and stuff. I really enjoyed the friendships with them, the secondary characters. Both of the boys' parents were there. I say boys, they're in college, men. Both of the guys' parents' sets get talked about well in here. But I feel like the romance was lacking a bit, because there's just so many sex scenes in this book that all sound the same, and not enough of them actually talking and getting to like each other. So I think maybe 30% less sex scenes, 30% more actually enjoying time with each other that doesn't revolve around sex, and I would have enjoyed this a lot more. Next up, I read Everything Beautiful Is Not Ruined by Danielle Young Ullman. When I first started reading this, I wasn't really feeling it because it started off in letter form, and I was like, is that what it's going to be all the way through? But it wasn't, luckily, so I did end up quite liking this one. It follows this girl who goes on this wilderness survival camp thing. She expects it to be sort of camping out, having a cabin and stuff, but it's not. It's build your own shelters, trek all day in the wilderness with a load of people that she finds not that great. But yeah, all of the kids on the wilderness camp all kind of have a different thing that they're trying to deal with. We have eating disorder, sexuality, being in trouble with the police, that sort of thing. And we find out what happens in her past and also what's going on now. And trigger warnings for attempted rape, because there was a scene in here where someone was trying to force himself on somebody else, but it didn't happen. But obviously, if you don't want to read about that, don't read this book. Next up, I read Suicide Notes by Michael Thomas Ford. This one is about a boy who wakes up in a psychiatric hospital because he tries to kill himself, and it's all about him attempting to not talk to a psychiatrist, but, you know, eventually opening up a bit, and all the people in the hospital that he becomes friends with or finds out about. And it's a pretty easy reading book from the beginning, but then something does happen towards the end that's kind of a bit more shocking and a bit more intense. But overall, it's a pretty easy read. There is kind of a weird dynamic towards the middle of this where a new guy is brought into the ward and he keeps trying to force himself on Jeff, our main character, and it's a really weird dynamic. So if you don't want to read about that, then don't pick this book up, because it is dealt with really weirdly and not seen as enough of a big deal. But yeah. Next up, I read We Disappear by Scott Haim, and unfortunately I wasn't a massive fan of this. I read Scott Haim's first book, Mysterious Skin, quite a while ago, and that is really intense, really dark. So I thought that this one potentially would go that way, because from the back of this it says that we follow Scott and him and his mum are trying to figure out about all these missing people, all these missing kids, and then he finds a kid locked up in his mum's basement, and it sounds really dark and thrillery. But reading this, it was actually kind of mundane and boring. I feel like this has that wrong synopsis syndrome. So if it actually said in the synopsis that this is about a guy who goes home to look after his mother that's dying of cancer, and they happen to enjoy looking at the missing kids thing and trying to figure that out as like a little side project thing that they do together, that would be fine. But because it sounds like it will be really intense and thrilling and they'll find out all these secrets, when I read it and that didn't happen, I was just disappointed. Obviously there is that missing kids element of it, but it's not really, it doesn't really do anything or go anywhere. Also the fact that it mentions a kid locked up in his mum's basement, that doesn't happen until halfway through the book, and it's not what we think it is. So yeah, it's just, it was disappointing, not gonna lie. There was this whole secret about his mum's past and something that happened to her in the past that I thought would be undone really well and be really interesting, but even that kind of fell flat as well. Unfortunate, but it happens. Next up, I read The Glass House by Suki Fleet. This one I really enjoyed. I actually gave it a 5-star for about a day and then put it back down to 4 because I really don't give 5 stars out very often and it didn't feel quite up there. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It's about this guy Sasha who is really introverted, he doesn't really have many friends, he doesn't like doing anything, he doesn't really eat either, there's a lot of depression and all that business. And then this other guy Thomas, who's kind of a breath of fresh air, ironic really because he has asthma, and yeah, it's about their budding relationship, their friendship, trying to open up to each other. And there's a lot about art in here. Sasha does art with pieces of glass, and that's very metaphorical as well for stuff that happens in his life. Again, trigger warnings for abuse in here. There's talk about past abuse that happened. Are you quite finished? But I did really enjoy this book. It's really short, but I got so much out of these characters and both of them were really lovely and really sweet. Next up, I read the novella Defensive Play by Jamie Deacon. This was just a really sweet, really fun, it was under 100 pages, I think it was like 75, 80-ish pages. And it's just about this footballer guy who falls for this other footballer guy. It's set in England as well, so that was great. Even though it was funny because I kept picturing American football in my head because I read too much about American stuff. So I kept picturing them in the full American gear even though it's English football. But anyway, that's beside the point. But yeah, this one was just a really fun, really sweet, quick, stop headbutting that story. And just really lovely. One of the guys is out, one of the guys isn't, and it's just kind of dealing with that and dealing with football. And the main character has anxiety, and that's mentioned quite often, so that's why it fit in with the mental health-a-thon. And yeah, if you're after something that's just really sweet and really easy to read, then check out Defensive Play. My battery just died, and I tried to feed this one so he'd leave me alone, but apparently cuddles are more important than food. You're bloody lovely, aren't you? So, the last book I read in May, yay, he's got down. The last book I read in May was It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini. So this one I started off not being a massive fan because of the writing style. So when the characters talk to each other at the beginning of this, instead of saying said Bob, it used Bob was like, which in itself is really weird, but it said it at the end of the sentence instead of the beginning, so it felt even weirder and more out of place. If it was written as Bob was like, hey bro, that wouldn't be so weird, but it was written as, hey bro, Bob was like, and it just felt really weird. But then it stopped doing it as soon as the main character gets into the mental hospital. So I was glad about that, but it also made me wonder why it was like that in the first place. So yeah, this follows Craig, who is kind of depressed. He's got issues with his eating and he's got heightened stress because of school. And one day he decides that he wants to kill himself, but instead of going through with it, he ends up at a psychiatric hospital. This is told over a few days because he's only there about 4 or 5 days, I think it is. And it's all about all of these different people that he meets in the hospital. He has to be put in with the adults, so it's adult patients and teenage patients like him, and talking about what stressed him out and what all of his feelings are and why he felt so pressured and like he didn't want to be here anymore. This one is very much own voices because Ned Vizzini himself was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and I think he wrote this straight after he was there, and then unfortunately he did end up committing suicide a few years after he wrote this. So it's kind of harsh because in here it's a bit more of a message of hope and trying to overcome it, and unfortunately he didn't manage to do that in his own life. But this is definitely worth a read or a watch. It's a film as well. I've not seen the film though. It wasn't my favourite book of the month, but it definitely wasn't the worst. I enjoyed it, but I think that beginning bit, the way it was written, kind of made me not enjoy it as much as I could have done. This was written in 2006, so there are some aspects of it where they talk about certain people in not the best way. For example, on the back it mentions a transsexual sex worker, but in the story the character's not treated as trans, it's treated as a boy that looks like a girl and tricks people into thinking he's a girl rather than an actual trans person. So I thought I'd mention that for the people that wouldn't want to see that rep done really badly. So yes, there we go. Those were all the books I read in May. All of them had some sort of mental health rep in them. I mean, I guess Bedlam's kind of iffy. It was a bit of a psychopathic maniac, so that counts, right? So yeah, let me know down below what you read in May, or if you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts on them. I would love to know. Let me know. If this is your first video by me, you enjoy it, then please check out some of my others, and if you continue to enjoy them, then please subscribe, that'd be awesome. Anyway guys, I'll see you in a few days with another video. Bye. Let's have a cuddle, you can stop being a dick, yeah?